Hi, welcome back to the Lead Writing Services YouTube channel. In this video we're going to talk about writing telephone conversations in a screenplay. Basically, when you come to a scene and you want to have two characters talking to each other over the telephone, but they're not in the same location, obviously, how do you make that happen? That's what we're going to discuss. Now, what you're seeing here is a scene when you have just two people in the same location. You have Steve's office. Steve, hello, Debbie, hi. That's if they were together in that office. But if they're talking on the telephone, they're not going to be in that same location. So how do you make it happen? How do you show it to where Debbie is in one place and Steve's in another place and they're talking to each other? That's what we're going to discuss. Now, there's a few different ways to do it depending on how you want to represent it in the film. For example, someone might be talking on the telephone and you just see them, or the audience just sees them, listening and talking, but the audience doesn't see the other person that they're talking to. Now, they might hear that person, but they don't see him. And in some cases, they might not even hear him either. You could just have the character doing this, listening, and then responding, and then listening, but you don't hear what he's listening to. So there's a lot of different ways you can write this in the script. And now we'll go over those ways right now. So, all right, let me delete this. Okay, now the first one I'm going to show you is a telephone conversation where the audience hears the other person that he's talking to, but you don't see them. So, okay, let's say he's talking to Debbie. Hello, and then Debbie. So what you'd want to do is do a voiceover, smart type, like that. In case you need a reminder, VO means voiceover. So when you put VO next to the character's name, it means that the audience only hears them, they don't see them. So you do, hello, Steve. How are you? That would mean he's got the telephone to his ear, and Debbie is just saying that through the telephone, or you just hear her voice, so clearly it's coming from the telephone. You could do a transitional, or I'm sorry, a parenthetical that says like from phone if you want, but you don't really need to, because the language up here indicates that Steve is on the phone. So clearly the voiceover is coming from the phone. And the director or the producer who sees this is going to obviously know the voiceover means it's coming from the phone. So you don't have to put this. Because if you did, then you'd have to put it for every single time Debbie talks. You don't want to do that. Alright, so VO for voiceover. I'm fine, thanks. And you? And VO again, I'm good. And there you go. When you want to end the conversation, you don't have to do anything special. Just put Steve hangs up the phone, and that's it. You don't really have to get any more involved in it than that. So that's how you demonstrate a telephone conversation when the audience just hears the person on the other end without seeing them. Okay, now the next thing we're going to talk about is how to make it so the character is just listening to the person on the other end, but you don't hear them. So let's delete this. Alright, so let's say Steve wants to talk to Debbie, but you don't want the audience to hear what Debbie has to say. He's just listening, yada yada yada, and then he responds. So what do? He puts the newspaper down on his desk and answers hello, and then there's two ways to do it. You could do a parenthetical called beat. That's a common one to use. It just indicates that there's a pause. Like, you could say he waits or he listens, but just put beat, and then it indicates that there's like a couple seconds where he's doing nothing except listening or whatever. So hello, beat. Oh, Debbie. Hi. and then beat again. Meaning he's listening. I'm good, thanks. And you? Beat. That's good to hear. So, you know, you get the idea. I wouldn't do this one too much, like, because don't have a long conversation where it's just beat this and beat that. You know, it'll look too messy. Only do this if you want to show him saying a few sentences and that's it. If he's going to have like a 2-minute conversation with this person, obviously you're not going to want, you know, the audience to not hear what the other person's saying. It's just going to be boring because you're going to be hearing him the whole time. So at least have the voiceover of the other person if you want to keep this going for too long. But if you just want a couple sentences where he's responding to this person without you hearing them, then just do a couple beats like that. Alright? Now, the other way to do it, basically, you would describe maybe an action that he's doing while he's listening. So, for example, hello, and then Steve paces around the room. Oh, Debbie. Hi. How are you? Steve scratches his head. You don't say. So you see, if you want him doing different things while he's listening, then that's one way to do that. You know, that might work good if he's walking around or just doing any goofy kind of thing. Maybe in like a comedic script, this might be appropriate for a conversation. Again, don't get carried away with this part. Only do it if he's talking to this person for like 10 or 20 seconds. You don't want to carry it on like this for too long. Again, it gets boring to the audience if they can't hear the other person. So, you know, only use this sparingly if it's necessary. All right. All right, and the final one that I want to go over is probably the most common. It's where you see both characters as they're talking. Like, you'll see one person talking, and then when the other person talks, it'll cut right to that person in their location. So you see each person's location while they're talking. You know, that's the best way to do it if it's a long conversation, I would say. Sometimes you can split the screen, but that's very rare. This method I'm going to show you is the best way to do it. It's called intercutting. Okay, so let's delete this. Now, okay, let's say he's talking to Debbie, and let's say Debbie is sitting on a bench in the park with her cell phone. So how do we show that? Well, okay, first thing we'll do, all right, he says hello, so we go to the next scene header, and we'll do exterior, the park, day. Now we'll say Debbie sits on the bench while holding her smartphone to her ear. Or a smartphone to her ear, I guess that would be a better way to... A smartphone to her ear. Debbie sits on the bench while holding a smartphone to her ear. And you'd say, Debbie, hey, Steve, it's me, Debbie, I don't know. Okay, so we've shown Steve in his location, and now we're showing Debbie in her location. So now the sloppy way to do this would be to go back to Steve and do something like continuous. This is the sloppy way. I'm not saying you should do this. And then you just be like, hi, Debbie. And then go back to her. You know, some people might do it this way. It's not really a good way to do it. How are you? I don't know. I'm not even thinking about the conversation. Okay, now this would be the wrong way to do it. Don't do that. I'm going to show you the easier way, the intercutting command that wipes all this out. Okay, so what you do is, instead of doing that, you want to tell the director that the scene is going to be intercut, meaning it's going to go back from one scene or one location to another location each time they're talking. And the way you tell the director that is put intercut phone conversation. Yeah, do all caps like that. And once you do that, you can just go right back to Steve like this. Debbie, hi Debbie, how are you? And then just go to Debbie. I'm great, thanks. And what that does is it tells the director to automatically go back to the scene that we last saw Steve in. So we saw him in Steve's office, and then we saw Debbie in the park. So now you go to intercut. We already know what where the two locations are, and we already have their initial introductory dialogue. And then after the first reply from Debbie, we go intercut phone conversation, and then it places the two locations together, and then we can just go back and forth between Steve and Debbie without having to write any more header dialogue or anything like that. Just do the regular communication dialogue. And then when you want to end it, you just go end intercut like that. And usually you would start the scene again, like Steve's office, continuous, Steve hangs the phone up, depending on where you want to leave it. Like if you want to leave it where the scene with Steve carries over after the conversation, then you would just go to this. Or if you want to leave it with Debbie, you could do the park, although it usually goes back to the first location that started the conversation. So since Steve was first, then we'll just do Steve's office. That's the better way to do it. Sometimes you don't always have to do this. You know, putting the location header back in there. You don't have to. I like to do it just to make it less confusing, because if you take this out and then you go like this, it gets a little sloppy, because you got the park right here, so people might think Steve's in the park. You know, you want to indicate that he's not in the park, he's still in his office. Continuous, and then Steve hangs the phone up. Yeah, I like it that way better. Make sure you use end intercut. That's important after the conversation's over. All right. There's another way to use intercut as well. I'll show you that now. This way is not as common, but it can be necessary in certain circumstances. All right, first thing I'll do is I'll get rid of all this stuff I just typed. Okay, so let's go back to the first scene heading, and we'll type intercut dash. All right, then we'll leave that interior Steve's office day, and then we'll do slash exterior the park day. I know that looks messy. I don't like to do it. It looks nasty just looking at that, but I've seen it done before. So some directors might want you to do it that way. So here's how it goes. So we're combining two scenes together like that. All right, so we leave it with Steve, hello, and then we go to the action line with Debbie. So we'll type Debbie sits on the park bench while holding a smartphone to her ear. And then we go right to what she says. Hello, Steve. It's Debbie. Like that. So remember how I said before, when two people are in the same scene, you know, you don't use voiceovers or anything, you just have them together like this. But it's different here because you put intercut in the scene header, and then you put both scenes in the same header. It's weird. Intercut interior Steve's office day / exterior the park day. So that's indicating that that before the second person talks on the phone, it's going to be in Steve's office. So you got all this representing Steve's office, and then when it goes to Debbie, that's the second part of this, the park. So sits on the park bench while holding us. So we know it's the park because it's right there. Hello, Steve, it's Debbie. And then we can just go, hey, how are you? Fine, thanks. All right, and you know, like same thing as before. When you want to end it, do end intercut, and then wherever you want to leave it off. Again, I would recommend the first scene you would leave it off in. So Steve's office, continuous. Steve hangs up the phone. Okay, that's the other way to do intercut. I don't like it that way, but you might find it necessary in certain circumstances. But there you go. So those are pretty much all the most common phone conversation ways to that didn't make sense. Most common ways to put a phone conversation into a script. So there you go. Again, intercut phone conversation in the action line is my recommended choice, but you can do what you want. All right. Hopefully this video is helpful. Subscribe, favorite, thumbs up, whatever you have to do. Help me out. Thank you. Subscribe. Thanks.